Well, well, well. Welcome back. Uh, we're still going to define internal and external motivation and identify both in different media. Internal motivation are feelings like jealousy, loneliness, and external motivation are feelings that drive a character in their decisions like war, poverty, or in this case, lack of food. So we're going to do a little close reading of Act Two, Anne Frank Act Two. Let's take a look together. Okay. So, oh, 1 year old. So, scene three, act two. It is night. A few weeks later, everyone is in bed and there's complete quiet. In the Van Dan's room, a match flares up for a moment and then is quickly put out. Remember, this is the echo of a scene from Act One where similar nonsense is going on. So, everyone is in bed, complete quiet. Match goes on and off. Mr. Van Daan, in bare feet, dressed in underwear and trousers, is dimly seen coming stealthily down the stairs and into the main room where Mr. and Mrs. Frank and Margaret are sleeping. He goes to the food safe and again lights a match. Then he cautiously opens the safe, taking out a half loaf of bread. As he closes the safe, it creaks. He stands rigid. Mrs. Frank sits up in bed. She sees him screaming. And remember, when they get really emotional, they revert to their German, where they grew up. Otto, komm schnell! The rest of the people wake, hurriedly getting up. Was ist los? Was ist passiert? Dussel, followed by Anne, comes from his room. As she rushes over to Mr. Van Daan, stiehlt das Essen. Let me get out of the way of the German here. Dussel grabbing Mr. Van Daan. You, give me that. Mrs. Van Daan coming down the stairs. Pooty, what is it? Right? And what is the work of these ellipses here? Could be coming down the stairs if the actress or director makes that choice. It could be a chance for us to think, oh, here we go, right? How she's going to handle this. Dussel, his hands on Mr. Van Dan's neck. You dirty thief. Stealing food. You good for nothing. Whoa, Mr. Dussel is not having it, right? Mr. Dussel, for God's sake, help me, Peter. Oh, more syntax. Peter comes over, trying with Mr. Frank to separate the two struggling men. Peter, let him go. By the way, this is a traumatic scene. I would hate for anybody I care about to experience something like this. Dussel drops Mr. Van Daan, pushing him away. He shows them the end of a loaf of bread that has been taken by Mr. Van Daan. You greedy, selfish. Margaret turns on the lights. Pooty, what is it? All of Mrs. Frank's gentleness, her self-control is gone. She is outraged, in a frenzy of indignation. Talk about your frenzy. All right, so let's take a moment and look at this through the lens of internal, external motivation. Okay? Hold on, I'm going to pause while we see what's going on. So anyway, as I was saying, let's think about internal motivations, include emotions such as jealousy, and external motivations, right? The reason she takes particular action. So let's think about those things in relationship to one another, in relationship to this scene. So when you're screaming, it is likely that you are screaming because of some sort of external motivation, right? If I wake up from a dead sleep and someone I don't expect to be there is there, I'm going to have a physical reaction to that. And I'm glad I do, because that means my brain's going to help me survive whatever happens to bring that stranger into my room, right? So Mrs. Frank transitions from an external motivation, safety, to what they refer to in the text as a frenzy of indignation. That means that the border between her anger and her feelings, right, and the way she feels physically and the way she feels emotionally, that border is kind of disintegrated here because her anger is so much bigger than what posterity or manners can contain. And she's very usually a quite mannered, always counseling Anne, to be reserved, to not engage the Van Dans in interpersonal conflict, right? So, ooh, that was good. So, the bread, he was stealing the bread. Do so. It was you all this time. We thought it was the rats. Ooh, right? Mr. Van Daan, how could you? Mr. Frank, Mr. Van Daan, I'm hungry. What an inept response. We're all of us hungry. I see the children getting thinner and thinner. So she's trying to talk about or guess what his internal motivation, which might be, the children and the desire to keep your children safe and a desire to keep your children happy, right? Notice how being happy and safety are related here. Internal and external motivations, internal and external conflict are together here. Um, your own son, I've heard him moan in his sleep. He's so hungry. You come in the night and steal food that should go to them, to the children, right? And then Mrs. Van Daan lamely says, he needs more food than the rest of us. He's used to more. He's a big man, right? Let's see how this might play out. Let's do a close little reading of the film version of this. Let me find it here. There we are. Okay. Wow.
You were stealing the bread.
It was you. And all the time we thought it was the rats. Mr. Panda, how could you?
I like that reaction shot.
Hungry.
All of us hungry. I see the children getting thinner and thinner. Your own son, I've heard him moan in his sleep. He's so hungry. And you come down in the night and steal food that should go to them, the children.
He needs more food than the rest of us. He's used to more. He's a big man.
You're worse than he is. You're a mother. And yet you sacrifice your son to this man, this deceiving.
Right? So let's take a quick inventory. What is the external motivation here? Well, let's say it's from Mr. Frank, right? Don't they have different colors on these things? I thought they did. Oh, yeah. So Mr. Frank, right? His external motivation would be the overall safety of the group, right? He wants us to be in an environment that's not as upsetting as it just was once a moment ago, right? What's Mrs. Frank's motivation? Well, external motivation is ostensibly the children, but her internal feelings, her internal motivation, being frustrated with the Van Dans, right? That frustration is coming to bloom. You can see it. Look at her face. Look at that reaction, right? Mrs. Van Daan, internal, must be a lot of feelings going on in there right now. Resignation, right? Her internal motivation is, all right, I feel ashamed, and simultaneously I feel defensive. It's pretty complex. And of course, Mr. Van Dan's external motivation is hunger, right? That's a physical thing. But his internal motivation right now, you look at his posture, you look at him, it seems to be shame. So this is the close reading of a small little scene from Act Two, but there's certainly a lot going on. Okay, so let's take a moment and think. Ooh, ooh. Oh, sorry. There we are. I want you to take a moment and find your rubber ducky. My rubber ducky right now is going to be my Kindle Reader. Okay. Oh, I love this thing so much. And I'm going to be recalling what I just watched, what I just saw, and it's all about, internal motivation versus external motivation. So I'm going to be thinking about all those things, and I'm going to explain what I just saw and my thoughts on it to my Kindle. You can talk to your rubber ducky or whatever object it is you're using to explain.